everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to have you here. Today we are going to be doing the 20 question book tag, and this isn't going to be necessarily about books. It's more like a reader tag, I guess you could say. It's more just like my opinions and stuff, and it doesn't really get into like book recommendations or anything like that, but this is just so you can kind of see what I'm into, the things I like, things I don't like, and my opinions on some stuff. We'll just go ahead and head on into it. So the first question is, what is your favorite genre to read? I don't necessarily have a favorite, but I more kind of go between thriller and romance, I guess. I would say probably more heavily on the thriller than romance. I feel like romance I'm more picky with, and a lot of things I don't really like, but thriller for sure, because it's more gripping, more captivating, I would say. Question 2, do you read more relatively popular books or more underrated books? Now, I want to be the person that reads books like nobody's ever heard of, like I think everybody wants that, but I tend to enjoy just watching a video like this or something and someone being like, oh hey, this book is so good, and me being like, okay, like I'm just gonna try it out without kind of knowing anything of what it's about, which is why some of these romance books I don't like. But I like going on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube or whatever and just finding books that a bunch of people are really enjoying and really liking, and then saying, okay, like a bunch of other people like them, so maybe I'll like them too, and just going from there. Because I feel like usually if a bunch of people are talking about a book, then it's somewhat good to the masses, at least some mass. I do want to get into more kind of underground books, I guess, more not so popular ones that not many people are talking about, and hopefully be able to talk about them to you. I just don't like reading the back of the book and trying to figure it out for myself. What is a book that you feel like was written for you? This is kind of an embarrassing one for me, but I would have to say it's not a book. I mean, it's a book, obviously. It's not like a singular book, it's more of a series, but The After series by Anna Todd. Now, I read these like way back, right? Like more back whenever they first came out, and I was kind of like living in it at the time in a way. Like I was kind of relating to the relationship in the book, and so when I read it I was like, oh wow, like I feel this, like I relate to this, and it made me feel better about my situation, I guess. So at the time, yeah, I did feel like this was totally calling my name, that this was supposed to make me feel better, I guess. It was just a very comforting book for me, and so that's kind of why I liked it so much. I don't know, it's kind of embarrassing, I know, but it is what it is. I probably won't ever be able to replace that as a favorite, to be honest. So nothing's quite lived up to that feeling yet. All right, number 4, a first or third person. I don't necessarily mind third person. A lot of times I don't think about it for a while, and I'll be reading it and then all of a sudden like I'll be kind of 50, 100 pages in and I'm like, oh, this is third person, and it's not a big deal, right? I don't really care. But I do prefer first person just because I feel like you're connecting with the characters more, you're getting into what they're thinking and what they're feeling and how, they're problem solving in their head, I guess. You can do that in third person, it's just not as personable, I feel like. So definitely first person is my cup of tea. Number 5, are you a mood reader or a TBR reader? Now, I don't think I've ever made a TBR, so I would say I'm more of a mood reader, but a lot of times I don't know what I'm in the mood for, so it's kind of just, I don't know what to read. So I do let my husband pick out my books quite often because I don't want to have to do it. It's pretty much every time I'm like, hey, what do I want to read? Pick a number, and then I just kind of read that. Whenever you ask somebody for their opinion and they give you their opinion and you're like, oh, that's not what I wanted to hear, I can kind of do that if I want to. So it kind of helps me gauge how I'm feeling without having to just dive deep into my thoughts and my brain, which I like that. Number 7, we've got series or standalones. And this is kind of man, I'm having to like make up all my decisions today. I'm not a good, like, I can't ever make up my mind usually. I would say I prefer a good series over a good standalone book. I like getting a lot more information and stuff like that. I like just really kind of diving into it and getting the full story and into the nitty-gritty and stuff like that, because I feel like, I don't know, it's just more immersive that way. I guess if it like continues with kind of the same storyline-ish, when they go off and they start doing a bunch of random other different things, sometimes I could live without that. But when it's really just developing the character and kind of following along on the same storyline-ish, and that's really developed, I prefer that over standalone, I guess. Who knows if that makes sense. So then we move into long books or short books. I prefer long books. There's something about like a 200-page book that just throws me off, or like a 150-page book that just, I don't know, maybe I'm judging a book by its length. Maybe. I just like reading, I like getting into it. I feel like short books, and I feel like everybody can agree with me, yeah, they're super easy to read, it's super nice, but I feel like they don't have enough time to really dive into everything that needs to be dove into. Is that a word? Dove into. I just feel like with short books, they don't really get into everything that they need to get into, and they don't cover everything as much as I'd like. Number 9, my favorite bookish tropes. I don't know if I'm the only one that's like this, but I don't associate tropes with any other genre other than romance. And I know there are some, right? Because I looked them up, because I don't know, I'm not well knowledgeable in the trope realm, but when I think tropes, all that I can think of are romance. So that's what we're gonna be talking about today. They're just all romance tropes. So I had to write them down because I don't even remember. We have friends to lovers, opposite attract, and I threw one in for thriller because I kind of knew that, but the unreliable narrator. So friends to lovers, every time I think of that, I think about the If He Would Have Been With Me, or whatever that book's called. Now don't get me wrong, I didn't really love the book, but I liked their friendship, and I liked watching them kind of figure themselves out the whole time, so I thought that was sweet. I just liked the resolution, to be honest, and then the rest of the book just came with it. So then opposites attract. I like drama. I like really intense argumentative like relationships in books. I like reading about it and stuff because it's interesting, but I like to use it as just general knowledge, right? So like back to this book, if they're arguing about something and I can see what they're arguing about, and I see how he reacts and how she reacts, obviously it's written by a woman, so it's not quite that, but I can say, oh, you know, this is how this is going, this is how their relationship is going, this is what their argument is about, and I can kind of problem solve their argument out in my head. And so that means that I feel like in the real world I'm gonna be better at problem solving arguments. Is that correct? I don't know, it could be, it could not be, but to me it also makes me feel like I'm doing better in my relationship than the other people. But that's like just hardcore opposites attract, like just absolutely hitting heads, but that's what I like. Then unreliable narrator. I don't think that I've seen it done in a way that I don't like so far, but I'm sure I could get one and just absolutely hate it. I think it's interesting because it kind of throws you for another loop, and I'm not very good at like picking it out unless if somebody's like, oh hey, this has like unreliable narrator, or if they tell you, or if you can just kind of tell that they're not quite in it 100%. I enjoy that. I think it makes it more interesting. It spices it up because not everybody's 100% reliable, you know? So why not throw it in a book? Number 10, we have favorite book to TV show / film adaptation. Aside from like the obvious, like the kind of more back in the day ones, obviously like the Hunger Games and the Maze Runners, I really enjoyed those, but I'll stick with more recent for this, and I'm gonna say the Summer I Turned Pretty series. I'm assuming that they're gonna turn the whole series into a series but so far they just have season 1 out, and I honestly, no hate to these books, right? They're cute, they're super fun, whatever. I didn't love them. And maybe I thought that the storyline was a little unrealistic for me, and I just kind of wanted a sweet little beach read, and then they got kind of more intense, and we're like, oh, the plot was different. I would not have expected that, like, in the slightest. But I gave these like a 3 stars. They were cute, fun. Would I read them again? I don't know, maybe, possibly. But I love the show, like, loved the show. I feel like the casting was really great. It just was so nice. I loved it. The books, like, they were nice. But the show was even nicer. Maybe an unpopular opinion, but that was, for me, I enjoyed the show more than I enjoyed the book, which I feel like oftentimes doesn't happen. Like with, no shade, but. Number 11, do you DNF? Yes, I do. And I don't like to do it that often because I don't like to not give books the benefit of the doubt. I like to try them out and see. But there are things in books that I'll read and I don't resonate with, I don't agree with, I don't whatever, and I'm like, you know, I just don't want to read about that. I don't want to. Like, if I'm reading a romance book, right, and this guy's calling his girlfriend like just names, and I don't like that. So I'm not gonna read it. Yes, I do DNF. I try not to do it very often, but sometimes if I can't get into a book, or they're doing something or saying something that I just totally do not like agree with or believe in or whatever, then I'll stop reading it if it's, you know, too much or just something that goes overboard for me. Ebooks, audiobooks, or physical books? I am in the mix, I would say, between ebooks and physical books. I do have my Kindle and I'm reading on that right now because I have that free Kindle Unlimited thing for a while. So I've been reading on that. I really enjoy it. I like it. I can just take it everywhere with me and it's nice. But I do enjoy reading physical books. I enjoy having physical books. You know, just that like inner nerd or whatever. If you're like this, I'm not saying you're a nerd, but my inner thoughts. I'm like, oh, I want to have all these books. I want to have them all on the bookshelf. I want to, you know, whatever. But at the same time, I'm like, there's really no point in having a book that I don't like on my shelf. Right, just realistically. The only books, honestly, that I feel like I need are the books that I would want to read again. And that's not very many of them that I've found. So I'm getting more into just borrowing from the library on my Kindle or just reading from Unlimited versus buying the books. But some of them I have to buy. So, what a shame. What a shame I have to buy some books. Oh, but audiobooks, that was another part of that. Audiobooks, now hear me out, I love a good audiobook. But all the audiobooks that I've listened to, which has not been very many, all the audiobooks that I listen to, I don't like their voice. And I'm not trying to be mean. I just don't like the way that they sound. I don't like their voice, and for me to be listening to this like 9-10 hour book and to just be aggravated by the people that are speaking, I don't want to do that. I'm sorry. I listened to one audiobook that I liked, and it was The Keeper of Enchanted Rooms. And I loved all the people that they chose for the audiobook. It was just chef's kiss, so perfect. But all the other ones, no, didn't like. What's your preferred page length for a book? I would say probably anywhere between like 350 and 500. I feel like that's a nice healthy range. If it starts getting more than that, I don't mind if it's in a good series that I'm enjoying or if it's just a really good book. But if it's like an okay book for me and it's like 800 pages, I get bored. And 9 times out of 10, I'm trying to finish the book anyway so I don't have to DNF it, and I just don't want to read like 800 pages of something that I'm not like super into, which I feel like is understandable. Number 14, hardback or paperback? I probably should have thought about this one before I started this, but I think there's pros and cons to both. I don't necessarily have an opinion, I would say. I think that a lot of times if I'm looking at something in a hardback, it's more bigger books and more fantasy books. And if I like the cover and I want them to remain nice, I think that's my gravitation to hardback. Those are the ones that I will probably pay more to get them in hardback. Like if you watched, I unboxed the Throne of Glass series and I got all those in hardback just because I wanted those to look nice and they're bigger. they're bigger books. So I feel like for me that's easier to read them like that than to just be holding them all in paperback and I don't know. Maybe it's just because I don't want to dent the spine or crease it or whatever. Maybe I'm just being a weenie. And then if books are cheaper hardback, sometimes they are. But if they're cheaper hardback, or if you can only get them in hardback, sometimes I don't really mind it. With that, if I'm getting a series, the whole series has to be either hardback or paperback, right? So say I got The Summer I Turned Pretty, say I got this series right here, and this book was a hardback. No, we don't do that here, unless if it's given to me. But I would have to either go return them or fix that. Other than that, it really doesn't matter. I like either or. I like both. If they're little tiny books, then paperback, yeah, sure. And they're cheap. They're cheaper. So there's pros and cons to both. I wouldn't say I have an opinion. I'll say this. I prefer a good floppy paperback over a hardback, but that's the only opinion I have. How many books are too many books in a series? Now I have some very strong opinions on this. Not like a number, because I couldn't come up with a number for you. I would say probably just in general, more than 10 is like, what are we doing? Why are we continuing this? Right? But if it's a good series, I can be okay with that. I can be okay with 10. My biggest gripes that I do not like being series, and I understand why they do this, I'm not knocking the author, okay, is when romance books have like 6, 7 books in a series and they're all focused on different siblings or different people in the family. I don't know why that drives me nuts, but it does. To me, I just look at that and I'm like, oh, it's just a ploy to sell more books, right? Because you're not having to come up with a new setting, really. You're not having to come up with a new, like usually they've already read the first book, so they kind of already know what world they're in, whatever, and so you're not having to do all that again, and you're more just developing a different plot and then kind of tying in some characters that we already know about. And I don't like that. I don't like that. Yeah, don't get me wrong, I've read a series like that, but it's just not my favorite. I would rather just read standalone regular books of different people, personally. And I'm not saying that you're wrong for liking that. I'm not saying, to me, I see it as like a money grab thing. I read the Brutal Prince series. I think so. I don't know. One of those series, right? And they have like all of the siblings. And then they have their children. So they have a series for them, and they have a series for their children. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying that was a bad series necessarily, but I'm just saying that it's a lot. It's too much for me from a author perspective. I get it, because you got one person hooked on this book, so now they're going to be hooked in for the rest of the family. They want to know what happens to the rest of the family because they really liked the first one. Then they read the whole series and then they're like, oh, well, they have kids? Well, what happened to the kids? And then you just get sucked into this like realm of this family, and you make more money from that because people are wanting to continue the series, versus you get a standalone. What are the chances of somebody going and picking up your other standalone? So I get it. But to me, just my brain, I look at it and I just think like, oh, like dollar signs. And usually I don't really like those series anyways, so kind of on the same train, when you have, I don't know if you'd call them thrillers or mysteries, but you have those books that have the detectives in them, or the PIs, and they have like 30 books following the same detective, and the detective just solves each case. Like, that's so repetitive. To each their own, right? I'm not bashing you. I'm not hating on you. I don't like that. It drives me nuts. That's what I think is too much in a series. That's my series gripe. The rest of it, I don't know if I have a number. I couldn't put a number on, hey, this is too much, hey, this is not enough. Sometimes a series needs a lot of books, but sometimes, like in the case of the detective books, you don't need 30 books. Just putting that out there. Just a thought. Spice or no spice? And I've been waiting to talk about this. I have a yes and no, right? Sometimes I don't mind it. Sometimes I can tolerate it. Sometimes I can be okay with it. Example, the the same book that I talked about earlier, the If He Had Been With Me, I think that's what the book's called, hopefully. They have this like one scene towards the end, just like slightly, it's not anything crazy, very light, and that added to the story, right? It wasn't necessary, but it felt like it could be necessary. So I don't mind that. But when the whole book is about it, right? Like, there's no need, there's no point, it just, yeah, let's go for it. Just because, I don't like that. I like plot, I like substance. I don't care about what they're doing in their spicy life. I just want to know the plot of it. And then if you're gonna like, I don't mind alluding to it if you're gonna do it a lot. Just, I don't mind that. I don't like it when it feels like they put it in there just for it to be spice. You know what I mean? But I feel like, going back to earlier what I said about I like watching videos of people talking about books and then being like, oh, everybody likes this, so let me try it. A lot of those books, they don't tell you that they're intensely spicy. And then I read them and I'm like, wow, that was a lot. That was too much. So I think that I do want to still read stuff like the popular books that everybody's talking about. But if you are not into spice, if you aren't into all that, you're kind of the same way as I am and you don't mind it when it goes with the story, okay, but it's not too much, then I still want to tell you like, hey, this is too much for me. Hey, like, I don't like this. This is a lot. This is weird. And then you can kind of go from there. I would say I could live without it completely. Totally live without it. But if it's in there a little bit, sometimes I can get past it, sometimes I can't. So I will be the one to tell you whether or not I can get past it or not. Because some of them I just, weird. Buying books or borrowing books. I kind of touched on this earlier a little bit. I'm trying, ooh, hungry. I'm trying not to buy as many books because I am just mentally here. I don't need to have all these books on my shelf. I just more need to have the books that I would want to reread again, realistically. And so I've been trying to have that mindset and say, oh, you know what, I don't need to buy this book unless if I want to reread it or something like that. Or if I can't borrow it, then I can buy it. But I'm not super big on just going to the store and just buying a bunch of random books anymore. Unless they're like on sale, like mega on sale, then I don't mind. But I guess as of right now, I prefer borrowing them. But on my Kindle. It'd be different going to the library and borrowing them, I feel like. All right, then we have dog ears or bookmarks. I actually meant to get my bookmark for this just a second. To be honest, you don't need me to answer the question anymore because I just did. I am a bookmark girl through and through. I don't like to do that. I don't like to bend my pages. But also I have this bookmark that my dad and I made when I was in like 6th grade. And I have never gotten rid of it. I still have it, and so this is just my bookmark. And I use it every time I read a book. So, definitely bookmark. Do you read while listening to music? No. No. Absolutely not. I get so sidetracked when I'm reading. Like, you wouldn't believe it. I'll be reading something and someone's having a conversation like across the hall or whatever. And I cannot focus on what I'm reading and I'm tuned into this conversation that I can't even hear. So, I'm afraid that if I start listening to music, especially music with words, then I won't actually be able to focus on what the book's saying, and then I'm gonna have to do that thing where I reread everything that I just read because I actually wasn't paying attention to what I was reading. Yeah, I don't like doing that. It makes me feel dumb. So I don't wanna do that. I guess I could listen to instrumental music, but I just haven't tried it. Maybe some point. I'll do that at some point for you. One POV or multiple? I like multiple. Multiple POVs. I like knowing what's going on in everybody's head. I just think it's more fun that way. Why would I not want to know what's going on with the guy and the girl? I want to see how they're both feeling. I want to know like what both their thoughts are. Because again, I like analyzing people's relationships in books. Makes me feel better about my own. It makes me feel like I'm doing something right. So the last question that we have for our 20 question book tag: one sitting. Do I like reading a book in one sitting or over multiple days? Again, I should have thought about this one too because I really don't know. If it's a good book, I'll read it in one sitting and no shame. Like, I don't mind. It more just depends on what time I have. If I have time to sit down and read a whole book in one sitting that I'm genuinely enjoying and want to read in one sitting, then I don't mind that. But I also don't have a problem taking 5 days to read a book. Obviously, I don't want to. I want to be able to read it super fast. I want to be a speed reader. But I'm not. I'm a slow reader. And it is what it is. I think if I could do every book, like just genuinely enjoy every book, I would like to read them all in one sitting. That would be fun. So whether I do that or not, probably not. But I would say if I had the option to just read everything in one sitting or read it over multiple days, I would choose one sitting. But that's it. That's all I got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope that this helps you understand what I'm into, what I'm not into. So if you feel like you kind of agree with me on any of these things, or you're like, oh yeah, I'm the same way. I like that. I dig that. I want some book recommendations from her. Then I guess you can just stick around, right? That's what I'm doing over here. That's what I'm doing. So you can subscribe if you want to. If you want to, it's just right there somewhere. I think it's somewhere down here. Somewhere just like right over here, I think. If I'm not mistaken. But for real, guys, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you. So nice chatting with you and letting you know everything that I feel about books, all of my bookish thoughts and feelings and whatever, my tastes, my opinions. So hopefully you resonated with some of those, and if not, I'm sorry, it is what it is. But thank you guys so much for being here. It was so nice to have you, and I will see you in the next one.